In today's webinar, we're going to talk about the transition into adulthood, the ages between 17 and a half to 21 and a half. What kinds of things should you be doing? What kind of government benefits are available to you? But we're also going to talk about some things that you can do prior to that age. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with today's webinar. Hello, Ryan and
Margaret.
All right. All right. We'll introduce her in a second. So I'm Keith. You guys are used to seeing me, I'm sure. We're going to have our special guest today who's going to talk about guardianship and government benefits. And as you know, I'm a parent just like everybody else. So I'm learning and listening. And this webinar in particular is really interesting to me because I am in the process now. My son is 17 and a half. Before it was all philosophical. Now it's real. So I've got to get these things done. So I'm really looking forward to learning a lot from you today. So with that, Ryan, why don't you introduce yourself and our special guest?
Cool. Yes, I am Ryan Platt. We have a company called the Special Needs Plan. So we've been serving families since 2005 in helping put together these long-term and short-term plans for the family and for their loved one with a diagnosis. And today I'm very excited to have one of our team members, Margaret Gaffney, with us, who is what we call our transition specialist, which helps people at the exact time frame where Keith is right now. And so I'll let her introduce herself and tell you guys a little bit about why she was drawn to this area of helping families.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it. And Keith, thanks to you too. I am a parent of a 24-year-old with an intellectual disability. So I have been through what Keith is facing right now. And when I was doing it for myself, there was not a ton of information on what exactly needed to be done as far as an action list, check off, do this at this time, this date, with the phone number. What do you say when the person answers the phone? That was the level of help I needed. Wait, when they answer the phone, what am I supposed to say? So I developed a system that's kind of a pretty cut and dried, straightforward booklet on how to go through the various phases of transition planning. And so I then came and worked with Ryan and really enjoy helping families navigate this so that they don't have to figure out how to do it on their own, because it's very difficult and very challenging. And you're only going to do it once. Because I work in this, I do it multiple times. And I've heard I don't know if I've heard everything from Social Security, but I've heard a lot of different things from Social Security. So I'm glad to be here to answer any questions and hopefully give you some support as you begin to make this journey through the later teen years.
Excellent. So I know one of the things that you had talked about, Margaret, is that there's things that even parents who have kids who are younger than 17 and a half, that they could have some things that they might be able to do. You want to talk a little bit about some of those kinds of things people could be looking forward to or thinking about?
Sure. One of the things that there's two things you can do before your child turns 17 and a half. And it's depending on what state you live in, these are going to vary. In North Carolina, you can get on a waiting list to receive services with adults with disabilities called a managed care organization. It's called something different in each state or county, depending on where you are. To find it, you're going to Google who provides services for adults with disabilities then add in the name of your county. And it might ask for your zip code, but definitely do your county. And the first thing that comes up should be an organization that provides services for adults with disabilities. And they should have an access number. And then you could just call and say, hey, I've got a 10-year-old with this diagnosis. I'm interested in trying to get services for them. What do I need to do? What kind of documentation do I need? Some states offer a lot of help when the children are under 18. Some states don't offer a lot of help until your child is over 18. It's very state dependent. So if you can find the organization that handles that in your area, they will have an information number you can call and find out and ask questions.
And just a quick follow-up to that.
I like that. I like that slow motion panning you did there, Ryan.
Yeah, like that. That's very professional, everybody. This is we're a very professional outfit.
It's on
over here.
It's on a carousel.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes, yes. You might see the other side of my window in a minute, and you'll see the parking lot. And then so Margaret, if let's say you have a 13-year-old, would they Google the same thing, or would they Google something else?
You could Google, well, I did say adults with disabilities. You can Google, if depending on the age of your child, who provides services for children with disabilities, who provides services for adults with disabilities. And it may take a couple iterations of that, but you should end up with who's in charge of that in the place that you live. Yeah. It's just so different. Maryland, for example, has regions. They don't even do it by county. They've got regions. So every state is different, but the Google question will get you pretty close to where you need to be. So that's one thing you can do before your child turns 18. In North Carolina, our waiting list to get services is 12 years. So that is something.
So you should start that at age 6?
Yes. So that's one of the things you want to do, like as soon as possible, ASAP, is find out the status of that in the area of the country that you live in. Because some states are really proactive in that. North Carolina, I know personally, is not one of those. Mm-hmm. The second thing you can do is find a professional planner like Ryan Platt who can help you start planning on how to pay for the safety net that the transition pieces are a part of, because it goes without saying, the sooner you start that, the better, because it's not cheap. So if you start that plan when your child is 7 as opposed to 17, there's obvious advantages to that. So those are the two things before 17 and a half that I recommend people do.
No, without a doubt. Go ahead, Ryan. I'm sorry.
One more question. So if they don't find services, would you recommend, because I know in North Carolina, they call it the Innovations Waiver, is what the services is under. Mm-hmm. And then in other parts of the country, it just might be a Medicaid waiver. And there might be several different waivers in your state mm-hmm. that your child could be eligible for, depending on what state you're in. So you might also Google Medicaid waivers programs or in your services.
State. Yes, because all of these services are paid for by Medicaid. No matter how they're set up or they're organized, Medicaid pays for them.
But they could also maybe, as an idea, Google like the local ARC or something like that, because the ARC would be able to probably point them in the right direction, right? So yes. if you're struggling with trying to find where you go here, or maybe you can reach out to your local ARC and see if the ARC is why don't you tell us a little bit about the ARC, Ryan, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so the ARC is an organization that was started, I believe, back in the 60s, mm-hmm. if I have that correctly. And it's an organization that advocates and possibly also provides services for children and mostly adults with disabilities. So one of the things that they do a lot of is a great deal of advocacy mm-hmm. And lobbying for disability rights. Mm-hmm. And to help individuals and families get what they need from a legislative level, federal and state. And then some of them will also actually provide services on a day-to-day basis that help an individual live in the community. So some of these ARC organizations will provide, respite care. They will provide supportive employment to help somebody on the job. So they could provide what are called home and community-based supports, which is helping somebody, navigate the grocery store, for example, navigate the bus schedule, mm-hmm. Those types of things. So this organization does quite a bit. I think Keith hit it on the head that, to call them and reach out to them, they would certainly be able to give you guidance in your area.
Excellent. I thought so because for those of you who are following me on YouTube, they know that I've been doing my series and documenting getting my son his guardianship. In California, they call it conservatorship. It's under the probate department. Got no clue why it's there, but that's where it is in California. But they directed me to a website that they recommended that is essentially fill in the blanks, print out the forms, take it to the courthouse type thing. It was pretty close to that. So for those interested in that, I can send a link to you guys later on if you're in California. I don't know if other states have that, but it's my attempt to try to get him conservatorship and guardianship without having to hire an attorney. So looks like I'll be able to do it. I was able to get my application into the court within a week, and I have a court date in November. Could have been in October, but I was going to be on the East Coast for my dad's funeral, so can't be in two places at once. I haven't figured that out yet. So anyhow, for those interested, I'll send a link. There might be other things like that in other states, but it's been a super helpful resource for me to help answer questions, fill in blank, print out the forms. I went to the courthouse. They still kicked it back because I didn't read the instructions that said make copies before you go. Some things don't change. Keith doesn't follow read instructions, right? I was like, I don't need to worry about that. So they kicked that back. But it's been a really useful document and resource for those. And I will include it in the replay link when you guys get that later on.
And I will say most states that I'm aware of, you can do it yourself. And in a lot of states, it's really the only option for some parents because guardianship can be super expensive. It isn't in North Carolina. So the county clerk courthouse, you go, and again, search bar, guardianship, and you can at least find the forms. You might not find the step-by-step thing that Keith found. The clerk of the courts usually are pretty helpful if you call and talk to them on the phone. I think the forms, when you look at them, are fairly self-explanatory, but again, it's one of those things where you need to read the directions and make a copy and maybe have somebody double check, because I'm like Keith. I like to skip ahead. So that is something, if that's would be helpful to your family as far as a time, money saving thing, you can certainly do it yourself. The only time I recommend people use an attorney is if they think their son or daughter might possibly be able to drive. And I'm sure that situation is different in every state. So my son is able to drive, but we had to jump through some hoops after guardianship to make it okay with the DMV that he could drive. Mm-hmm. Some states may handle that differently, but if you think your child may one day learn to drive, look into that before you finish the process.
Right, because you may need to kind of carve that out.
Yeah, it might be a box that you check on a form, and that makes it all go great. Right. Otherwise, you could hit a snafu.
Or it might be called limited guardianship, where
why is
carve
that,
out.
Why is that something that I'm just trying to think ahead, because I don't know. My son's not going to be one of those people driving, but I'm just asking for the other parents who might be in those situations. Why is that something that you would want to? I mean, why is that something you would carve out right now? As I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, when you become the guardian of a person, the legal form of that is they're declared incompetent. And so that means that in North Carolina, you get a letter from the governor saying this person cannot drive because they've just been deemed incompetent. I went there's a form at the DMV that I took to my doctor because there's a ton of reasons why people aren't allowed to drive. They've had brain tumor surgery, they've had a stroke, they have seizure disorders, blah, blah, blah. So there's a medical form that you take to I took him to my son's family practice guy, and he said, checked all the boxes. It's fine for him to drive. I mailed that into the DMV in Raleigh, and then the hold was lifted off of my son's account at the DMV. Okay. So it's not a horrible hoop to jump through, but I just want people to be aware that there could be a hoop to jump through. I didn't know at 18 that my son was going to be able to drive. Mm-hmm. At 22, it was obvious he was going to be able to. So it's a long-term thing to think about. You aren't always going to know if your kid's going to be able to drive at 18 because they change so much, even after 18.
I mean, obviously, I've been doing these webinars with Ryan and you guys for a while now, so I was aware this guardianship was coming on, but that was years ago, so it was sort of, philosophical at that point. But now that it's real, I'm just wondering, I just lost my train of thought. What the heck, Keith? So anyhow, what other carve-outs are there potentially available for people? Voting, marriage.
Voting.
Yeah, but Davis was able to vote he's able to drive, he's able to get married. Those were not extra carve out things, but in other states they may be. I guess the bottom line is be aware in your state what is allowed and not allowed if you sign this piece of paper, which is something we should all do every time we're signing a piece of paper. I also recommend that parents carry a copy of the guardianship papers with them at all times, because the guardianship is really designed for emergency use. I've been my son's guardian for 6 years now. I've never used it. It's for emergencies, either financial emergencies, but certainly medical emergencies. And I don't want to go to the emergency room and say I'm my son's guardian and not have a piece of paper to back it up.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Margaret, but and this is going to be a question coming for you, by the way, is, I know Davis works, and I know some parents have asked me in the past, so, well, if I get guardianship, that's going to be a negative on his ability to get a job. It's going to come up in the search that employer is going to do. They're going to realize he has a guardian and he's been deemed incompetent by the legal system, so they're not going to hire him. So that makes me nervous because it's going to ruin his chances for employment. Can you speak to that concern based upon your exact experience?
Yes. First of all, I can tell you that's not true. And the reason I know that is because the attorney that did his guardianship did a background check on Davis, and guardianship did not show up. But that being said, my son has a disability, and I want the people that he works with to know that he has a disability so that he is in a position to advocate for himself. So he got his job through supported employment and voc rehab. So the place that he works understands his disability and is able to accommodate him. But they're not going to find out he has a guardian. They probably don't even know I am his guardian where he works. They're never going to see that in a background check. So again, guardianship is invisible until there's an emergency.
If a medical emergency does occur, is that something the hospital will ask for? Is like, hey, because it'll be clear if they're talking to my son and they're trying to get him to make decisions, but he's not going to be able to articulate that. He's not going to understand that, whether or not he was under the distress of a medical emergency. It'll be clear. But are they going to say, hey, in your case, your son can drive. He's probably able to communicate relatively well. How would the hospital know that that's there? One, would they require it to talk with you?
The answer is yes, they would require it to talk with me because they take HIPAA rules very seriously. Unless you're in your GP's office and they've known you, they might not care. But an emergency room is going to care about HIPAA. So how does the hospital know that status? We have a hospital group here that my doctor is a member of called Novant. And in their computer system is the guardianship papers and the notification on Davis's medical record that he has a guardian and that it's me. Davis also has a laminated card in his wallet in case he's unconscious that says, my mother, Margaret Gaffney, is my guardian. Here's her cell phone number. So that if they look through his wallet, they see, oh, we better call Margaret. So even if the policemen don't have access to the hospital records, it's in his wallet. So what I recommend to parents is run through the worst scenario possible and then plug the holes. Because you don't want to be, and it's hard to explain to people in the emergency room what guardianship is. They kind of understand, but if you have a piece of paper that has a judge's signature on it, they're going to let you go back and be with your child and help them make decisions. And really, that's what guardianship is allowing the parent to continue in the parental role that they've been doing since birth, just legally enabling it to continue past the age of 18.
I'm going to ask this question. I'm going to get to everybody's questions as I can, but one of the questions came up is applicable to now. Someone was saying that they got a power of attorney for medical and financial. Now, I remember Ryan talking about before about the limitations of that. I don't remember what they were, but what are the limitations if someone goes the route of power of attorney versus full-blown guardianship / conservatorship? Margaret R.
Okay, that is an alternative. As long as parents understand what it means. So this is where incompetence and competence comes back into play again. Guardianship is declares that a person is incompetent to make financial and legal and financial decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Power of attorney says this person has the capacity to do it, but if they choose, they can include their parents in the decision-making process. If they choose not to include their parents in the decision-making process, nobody can make them, because the attorney, by letting them sign the power of attorney, has said that they have the competence to make the decisions.
Make the decision.
So if you have a compliant child that turns into a compliant adult and says, oh yeah, I want mom there, that would probably not be an issue. But if you have a person who has an anxiety disorder or high anxiety levels and gets described what an appendicitis attack is, and he's going to have surgery, or she, and they kind of freak out about it, you're in a little bit of a pickle.
Right.
So
do anything.
it depends on your child's capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people that we deal with intellectually are not above the age of 15. Mm-hmm. So they cannot really make decisions like an adult would. So most of the people we deal with, they need guardians because they're not mature enough or have the capacity to make those kind of complicated decisions.
So if I'm hearing
that doesn't mean they're less independent. Independence is a parenting thing.
Right.
They're not legally made to be dependent on their family because they have a guardian. Mm-hmm. There's two different things.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is that the power of attorney has some flexibility in it in terms of giving you access to that, but you're not the final decision maker. So the child can say, you know what, I don't want to take that shot, Mom. I know you want me to take it, but I don't want to take it, so I'm not going to. Nanny, 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 right?
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Versus if I get a conservatorship or guardianship and I am the custodian of his estate and his person, then I can overrule whatever his anxieties are, just like I can as an adult, as his parent now.
Yes, the same way you did when he was 10.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of stuff they don't want to do and they just have to do it. The same applies. Yeah, exactly. The same applies after 18 if they have the kind of disability that makes their capabilities limited on a lifetime basis.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I think Margaret made a great point that, you know, if you do decide to go down the guardianship road, guardianship doesn't mean dependent on you forever. Mm-hmm. Right? It still means they could, if they have the ability to live semi-independently, right? Maybe they can live in an apartment, you know, by themselves or with a roommate or with some support. You know, that's still an option. So we just always want to make sure that, you know, parents understand that, because they do use that word that a lot of parents don't like, right? And it can be very hard as you're building your child up from 0 years old to 18 and trying to continue to get them to develop to the best possible place they can be. Right. Then all of a sudden the court system wants to chop you off at the knees and say, oh yeah, my kid's incompetent. You're like, oh my gosh, I've been his whole life or her whole life, I've been working not for that word to come into play. And now I have to agree with you. That can be very challenging.
Right. I imagine, you know, I want to, is there any substantive difference between guardianship and conservatorship? Because I've always used the word guardianship, but I was told here in California, we do it as conservatorship. Is there any difference between the two of those?
They are used in different states for different purposes. Sometimes in some states, they'll use conservatorship completely, and that'll mean the same thing as guardian, right? Financial, healthcare, person, education decisions, everything. And yet most of the time, conservatorship is really considered kind of the financial side of life, right? If some states will separate it out where it's kind of guardian of the person, and then there's conservatorship, which is handling the financial pieces of someone's life. You know, which is, you know, my next statement will make this unable to be used in 5 years, but you know, everything about Britney Spears that everybody talks about is a conservatorship, right? She can't control her own money.
Well, and the other thing to think about too is every state is also dealing with older people with a lot of assets that are starting to lose their competence. They got family members that are fighting over stuff. There's a whole nother branch that's for guardianship. Really was started for senior citizens with a lot of money. And our kids don't have a lot of money, so they don't need to have anything to do with that and trustee officers and, you know, quarterly audits. That's for a whole different class of people at the end of their life.
Yeah, so most of the time for the families that we are and that we support are usually the child doesn't have any money. So you don't really need a guardian of the estate or a conservator of the estate because there is no estate, right? We want them to put the money in the special needs trust and the ABLE account, and you can be the trustee of the special needs trust and make financial decisions. You can be the authorized individual on the ABLE account and make decisions. And then you can be the representative payee of any Social Security income that comes in for your child and manage that account. So for most, as just like Margaret said, for most of the families we serve, this is going to sound terrible, but the amount of money in our children's names, we're trying to make them poor.
Right.
So
and keep them poor.
And keep them poor, at least in their name. Maybe not in other places, but in their name. Right. But in the other places, as the parent, you can still control that without, this is a big deal, and Margaret mentioned it, without massive amounts of court oversight. Because if you are the guardian of the estate or the conservator of the estate, the court system has to be in your business. Because they've given you control of somebody else's money. So they want it to be accounted for, like Margaret said, every month, every quarter, every year. And it's a whole lot of layers of work for something that probably doesn't need that. More than likely, you don't want to need that. Just adds a layer of extra
that is
work.
So interesting. I should have probably talked to you before this, but I was trying to do it without
you probably should.
No, but I was trying to do it. No, I was trying to do my process like the other parents are going to do. They're not all going to be able to pick the phone and call Ryan and say, Ryan, what do I do here? So the mistake that I make, I'm just saying, they're not all necessarily going to, but I'm saying the mistake I did, and I know now I need to change that, is I asked to be the guardian of the estate and the person. So by me doing that, that's going to complicate things. Even though he has no money, I was thinking I needed to do it because he needed to, I needed to do that for the representative payee for his Social Security benefits. So that's a mistake I made. I'm glad I caught that. I'm glad I was here today.
Yes, see, I'm glad you're here today too. And hey, everybody, and that's from Keith Caldwell, who basically has me on speed dial.
I did not want to use that.
And I'll answer Keith's phone call because I'll be like, oh my God, what's going on?
No, but I wanted it to be as authentic as possible so people could see the same struggles that they're going to be going through. So that's the thing.
Or they can see the struggle they could avoid.
There you go. And one way to avoid that struggle is to call your county clerk at the courthouse and say, I am applying for guardianship. I want to move for guardianship for my minor child as they become an adult. And that puts them in that guardianship of the person category. However it's called in your state, that's what you want. You're not taking care of your 85-year-old grandfather with U.S. Steel stocks. You want to be guardian of your minor child as they become an adult. So they'll say, fill out Form B. Because our form in North Carolina has 3 check boxes. And if you don't know what to check, you're going to check the wrong one.
Well, I clearly checked the wrong one. I checked one too many, so I'm going to have to fix that. Yeah. But that's okay because, everybody makes mistakes. One thing I want to say that was helpful is when you're applying for your guardianship or conservatorship, as I did in California, it costs $435 to apply. And it would have cost me that if I was the one doing it. But since I'm doing it on his behalf and he has no assets, they gave me a fee waiver, an automatic fee waiver of the $435. I mean, we were prepared to pay it out of his trust if we had to, but I'll save the $435 all day long, right? That's more golfing. For Xander and I.
You need maybe some lessons.
Yeah, I clearly need that. One other thing I want to highlight with other families who might be going through this as well. So I talked to my ex-wife. I do everything with her. We get along tremendously well. If you've seen our webinar before, I had her on here, and Nicole and I may not have been a perfect couple, but we are great parents for our kids. We co-parent very well. So I've been including her in on this, even though I'm taking the lead on it, and I just share everything what I'm doing and blah, 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 blah. So one of the things we talked about is, should we put our oldest son on as a co-conservator as well? And we decided to go ahead and do it only because if something happened to Nicole and I at the same time or at different times, then my older son would have to apply to the court to do it. Now, I know he's not going to do anything. We just have him there as a placeholder because right now I'm working to get his conservatorship taken care of. And once that's done, he's a conservatee that's done. So the likelihood of me and Nicole dying before this is done is remote, so I'm worried less about that. But I wanted him in there so he didn't have to deal with, oh, what do I got to do now? How do I get in charge of my brother's assets, money, and resources, and where he's going to live, and all that kind of stuff without knowing what he's doing? So I personally added him in on the front end. There was no downside to that as far as we know, unless you guys are going to share with me right now there are.
Okay, I have a couple of questions about that.
Okay.
So it sounds like there are 3 people that are sharing conservatorship of your son.
Mm-hmm.
True?
There will be me,
okay.
My ex-wife, and my oldest son.
Okay, so let's say emergency happens, you're at the emergency room. Do
Mm-hmm.
all of you have to be there to make a decision, or can one of the 3 be there to make a decision?
Any one of us.
That's clearly written
yes.
on the piece of paper that you're going to show the doctor.
Well,
Super,
it's
because
in the forms we filled out, but that's a good point. I'll have to write that down. I don't know what we're going to get in the end.
Exactly. So then you get all this paperwork and you have the theory, but then the thing happens. So logistically, you're driving to the emergency room, you got the piece of paper, but only one of you is there. What's going to happen when the doctor says, oh, there's 3 people's names on this, and the doctor doesn't know anything about conservatorship or guardianship, or very little?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm saying that is because there's a county near ours that requires 2 parents to be guardians. And even though it's written sort of clearly on the guardianship papers that only 1 parent has to be there, we've had multiple problems with the doctors, the hospital saying they both have to be here.
So and that would be hard for us because my son's down in San Diego if there was an issue
exactly.
here.
Well, and so you want to make sure the language is not the word and.
It needs to be or.
Yep.
All right, isn't this great, Ryan? I went off and did it all on my own, and I screwed everything up, and you guys get to correct me live.
Poor Keith's like, thanks a lot. This is
no, it's good.
Terrible.
It's good because as much training as I've gotten on this, I still made some things here, and I wanted to do it on my own. So here we are. This is good stuff.
And again, you're not in this situation, Keith, but also what people want to think about with shared guardianship, if the area even lets them. We have other areas that we know of won't even let 2 people be the guardian, right? They're like, nope, one of you has to be it. That's it. Choose one. That's it. So some areas of the country won't even allow that co-conservator situation. And again, you just want to be careful. And the reason I say that is we've had situations in other states where, mom and dad are the guardians, and then they didn't see eye to eye on decisions. Right. And then all of a sudden, literally, the 2 guardians went to court on these decisions, and they've been battling in court for 5 years about decisions and who's going to make it and what's going to happen. And so you just want to be you just want to be sure if you're going to do multiple people.
And usually there's 1 parent that handles the medical stuff. There's usually not mom and dad at the doctor's office every 3 weeks. So it's logically the person that handles the medical appointments and medication, they would be obviously the best choice. And Ryan will speak to, you can also designate who you want to be the next guardian in your will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he can talk about that a little bit.
They still have to go through the process.
Yeah, they still have to go through a hearing, but it's more of a rubber stamp because you've already said in your will, I want this person. They do have to go through the process, but it's not super complicated. it will be happening at a stressful time.
Right.
So those, depending on where you live, what the laws are, those are considerations to be thought about.
Yeah. Yeah. I would just ask as you go through the process, Keith, this will be a great example. We've actually never had anyone put the next generation on there right now, right in the beginning. And so that would be a great question for the clerk's office or for the judge when you go to guardianship and say, hey, we have these 3 people on here. Can you tell us how this is going to work if we really needed it? Like, does everybody have to vote or no?
Right.
Or can they vote by phone?
Yeah, or can they vote by right. So I would just in your specific situation, now that we're just hanging out with Keith and 200 other people, talking about just opening up your life, baby. Here we go.
Here it is.
I feel like all of a sudden we're gonna be like Dr. Phil over here. All right, Keith.
My couch is over there.
Lay down on the couch. Here we come, Keith. Here we come. No, I would just ask that question when you're talking to him next.
Margaret, one of the things I wanted,
and you probably have a guardian ad litem, right? Did they give you what was called and it might be called something different in California, I have to look it up. It's called a guardian ad litem, which is basically an advocate for Xander, for your son.
There is one,
yes.
But that happens later on. I assume that this process, they're going to review my forms. I'm obviously going to say, hey, I'd like to take off that guardian of the estate thing. I've been advised I did that wrong. So I need to do that in my November hearing. So I'll take care of that. But one of the things the attorney talked to me about, one of the things that the attorney talked to me about that would be helpful, this is in California, was that, because there's a free legal aid. That's what I mean by the attorney. And he was describing what you're talking about, that sometimes there's problems between the co-conservators about who's responsible for what. He says how they typically address that is co-conservator A is responsible for B, C, D, and E, and it's written down so that the court knows if there's ever an issue is that, hey, Nicole, you are responsible for X, Y, and Z, and you didn't get it done, and vice versa. That's not an issue for us because I would never, ever, ever do something without her consideration and vice versa. I trust that with 100%. And me and Nicole have that kind of relationship. We'd never do that to each other. But that was a discussion the attorney did bring up about, if you're going to be a co-conservator, you should be concerned about that. I said, well, for my case, I'm really not. All right.
I have one addition now to the guardian ad litem. So it would be helpful for people before the guardian ad litem hopefully they will call, make an appointment, but the guardian ad litem is, and people all through the process are going to be asking Xander if he understands what's going on. And they're going to want some sort of answer from him, because that's the guardian ad litem is there for him not to be taken advantage of, to protect his rights. And so whatever capability your child has, do some training so that they have an answer to that question if they are verbal. So my son, I just said, Davis, this lady's coming. I've got to do some paperwork. It's just so that I can keep helping you with your money and going with you to the doctor. And he's like, fine, because he didn't really want to do that by himself.
Right.
But he had to ask that question. He answered that question. In our county, the notification that you have somebody that wants guardianship over you is brought to the house by a county sheriff. That frightens some people. So when you're doing your do-it-yourself, ask what the process is. Are people going to be coming to the house? Who is it going to be? And what does your child need to expect will happen? Because Davis was asked when the sheriff came, he was asked at the guardian ad litem meeting, and he was asked at the hearing. The judge asked him, "What do you understand what's going on?" And he just repeated, "Yeah, my mom's going to just take care of money and the doctor for me." And then the reports back that up. But I just want parents to know what to expect, that if your child is verbal, these folks work with adults with special disabilities all the time, so they know the group that they're working with. But some preparation on your part will help the whole process go smoother.
One of the commitments we made in today's webinar, so I just want to make sure we pivot to that real quick, is government benefits. So now as my child is getting ready to be 18, he's going to qualify for government benefits on his own. which I have to apply for on his behalf, obviously. So what kinds of benefits are we talking about are going to become available to him at 18? And what should we do with those benefits as they come in? If they're income, he doesn't clearly need the money. Can we reinvest that money into investments? Can we use it to pay rent so that we could to do other things with it? What are the kinds of things that potentially he could apply for when he turns 18?
Okay, so the basic cash benefit is supplemental security income, which is SSI. And that's
about how much?
Supplemental security income called SSI.
And it's about how much a month?
If I have 800. The full amount is close to 800 now. When you first get accepted, you get 2/3 of that amount. And then there's a two-step process where once your child begins receiving that money and now has an income, you can then charge them rent for the use of their room, which will bump it up to the near 800, which will put money into your account that you follow Ryan's directions about what to do with it. How to say, what are you going to do with that $400 a month? I charge my son $400 a month, and getting a cash benefit every month is an opportunity for you, the parents, to give your child practice, exercise, whatever it is they need to do to learn how to use a debit card. And that is a process that will take a long time. So think a year. Start with baby steps and move up. Hopefully this is an opportunity for them to start to learn to get their own groceries. Not at the beginning. You start with, you got a little list of stuff you want. What is your favorite cereal? Okay, we're going to put that in my cart, but then you're going to pay for it when we get up there. Then they have a list of 5 things, maybe 2 months later. Maybe then they have their own grocery cart. Maybe then you are at the deli and you say, I'll meet you in the bread aisle. And it's amazing how over time they will end up doing their own shopping and ending up and paying for it by themselves. It took my son 9 months to figure that out.
That's awesome.
With little jeep, 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 do this, little pushes. And so the money management opportunity with SSI is huge.
Are there any other benefits? Like, for example, I know that's one's coming in, but are there benefits relative to housing reimbursement costs? Is there medical potential that they could get at 18 that's in their name? Because right now he's getting Medicaid, I think, whatever, Medi-Cal, whatever, one of those meta, for his government or for his health care. So at 18, does that change? Is that something different than SSI that he needs to apply?
It is different from SSI, and it's handled differently in every state.
Okay.
Medicaid is insurance for people that are low income, and it's also services for adults with disabilities. In some states, you are able to get that because you are a child and or an adult with special needs. So you can get them at any time after you're born and diagnosed, and you can apply. In other states, it's income based on the family. For example, North Carolina, it's income based. So unless you are very low income, you're not going to be able to qualify as an adult with special needs until after you turn 18, and they just look at your income, which we've already decided is pretty much zero. So we start the application process for SSI after 18. If you get approved for SSI, you automatically get a Medicaid card. You do not have to go through the process twice.
Okay, good.
And then, so if you're on the waiting list that we talked about at the very beginning, and you have a Medicaid card in our state, every state is different, you then are eligible for certain services, which are, again, different ages. Maryland is different. You get stuff until you're 21, then you don't have anything for a year, and then it starts at 22. So you just have to explore what's going on in your state. We get supported employment, respite, community engagement, which is tying your adult child into stuff in the community that he or she is interested in, and supported in-home skill building, which nobody uses really until their child is getting ready to move out. So those are, but the most important of that, I think, is supported employment, because they will do job training and job coaching, and Medicaid pays for. That's one of the services that Medicaid pays for. So each state is different. Medicaid and SSI are kind of the pair that goes together.
So
in
at
some way,
18,
shape,
at
or form.
18, we should be looking to get the Medicaid and the SSI all nailed down. SSI or Medicaid would have other services that are below that are being paid for that we'd become aware of. Is that true?
Yes, if you get approved for Medicaid, there are other services within that.
Okay, all right. So that's it. So if we're a parent, kids turn 18, apply for SSI, apply for Medicaid. Once that's done, you'll have benefits. And I say you do that even if you don't think you need them right now because they're in place. Because right now, you're the person who's responsible for your child and that has the greatest motivation. Something happens to you, the next person in line may not have the same motivation. It might be like, this is too much to deal with. I'm not even going to go down that road. So I would encourage all parents to go ahead and do that. And we're going to turn to some questions because I've been selfish for myself, but I think it's been helpful and illustrative for others. I'm going to grab a couple questions if you don't mind. Hold on a second, everybody. Let's see. Can my child get SSI at 18 if he remains in public school into 22? That's here. I will bring him in. Oh, it worked. There we go. Michael the Tank Engine. Who was that guy we had last time? I forgot his name. It was an interesting name. But anyway, go ahead, Margaret.
Yes, you can apply and begin to receive SSI. Apply the month after your child turns 18. If your child stays in school, they are considered a student through the age of 22. If for some reason you have a child that is able to work while they're in school, there's an exemption that will keep it so that your SSI payment doesn't go down based on your paycheck. You get the full amount of SSI and you can keep your paycheck until the adult turns 22. Then they're done with school, and if they're working and they submit wages every month, the amount of the check will vary depending on how much they work.
Okay. And I don't really want to dig into the ABLE account stuff, Ryan, but is that something that could be lessened by putting some of those funds and put them into an ABLE account, or does it really not matter? If you get the gross salary, it's going to reduce your SSI by that amount, period, whether or not you put that money into an ABLE account. Is that accurate? Okay.
Period.
Yes. They're going to get their money is what you're saying. Right.
Yeah. If your child has the ability to work, then they're going to reduce SSI if they're not in school.
So just remember that the amount of the benefit and the paycheck is more than the $800 benefit amount, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So it's in your child's best interest financially and emotionally to work.
No, I agreed. Can you guys see that? I don't know how to pronounce the name. Equine, Wyoming. That is a very unique name.
Yeah. Got to be something with good horses. Got to be something going on with horses.
In Wyoming. In Wyoming. There we go. If they are employed, my kiddo earns $10 an hour. Is there a cap on earnings for SSI? Is that sort of what you were talking about a second ago?
Yes, it's a monthly cap, and it's called Sustained. What is it? It's an acronym, SGA.
Sustainable Gainful Activity.
Sustainable Gainful Activity. And it's if you ever want to look into the rules of Social Security, you can go to ssa.gov, and they have a red book that describes all of their little pieces. Mm-hmm. So that you want to keep your monthly income below that level. And I think it's $1,310 as of now.
Yeah, it's a formula where SSI will be reduced in terms of the amount of income you receive, and the formula they use. Don't quote me directly, like Margaret said. Go to the red book for the exact. But I believe on earned income, it's the first $60 or $65 is free, and then every $2 they earn from income, their SSI is reduced by 1. That's why it's and so you can figure that out. It might even be a little bit higher than $1,310 right now. It might be $1,500. It just depends what that formula comes out to. But what Margaret quoted was the Medicaid number. So even if your child could earn income and SSI is reduced to 0, they still might make too much income to keep Medicaid going. So you just have to balance these out.
There's a Medicaid income limit and a Social Security income limit, and that's SSI 1. And there should be, I know there are people that work through Voc Rehab that are called benefits counselors, and we have them in North Carolina, and they help families navigate services, not benefits and salaries, and because it's very intricate. Yeah. So if you have serious questions about it, you can see if you can locate one of those people. But the Red Book has all the information in it. It's updated every year as far as what the rules and regulations are of SSI. And your whatever your healthcare system is, Department of Health and Human Services, will be equally clear about Medicaid.
Who's the Red Book? What's the Red Book?
The Red Book is the manual for Social Security Administration.
A little bit of light reading, what you're saying?
Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. And Keith, you mentioned before, should we apply for government benefits? Should we not? Not sure if my child's going to be able to work. Maybe they can. One of the things that we suggest is, yes, you definitely want to apply for the government benefits. And here's one of the reasons. We have a family we work with. The parents are in their 80s. Their daughter wasn't able to work for a long period of time, but now she has a part-time job at a school that actually educates individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Mm-hmm. And now, between her Social Security disability income, because when parents retire, now their child can receive benefits on their record, which is sometimes higher than SSI, but they can keep Medicaid if they do the right qualification techniques. But with that money and with the money she earns, she's over the income limit for Medicaid. But since she was originally approved for it all those years before, she can switch over to another area of Medicaid called Healthcare for Disabled Workers, which allows her to keep her Medicaid, allows her to actually increase the amount she can save in her own name, and increases the level of income she can have. So again, it's really important to be able to get in the system so that as your child develops and grows as an adult, that if they are able to work for a period of time, they can maneuver around and not lose benefits going forward. So I know I just went off a cliff.
No, but I think what it illustrates, though, Ryan, is that there's a need for our plan to be flexible, right? And to have the elasticity to be able to accommodate this, to do that, and to open up as many avenues as possible, right? And to do it so that the next generation who's going to take over for you doesn't have to do it. That's how I'm saying. It's like, here's all the things that are available. I'm doing it all the work, so it's there in case it pops up, right? Because we really don't know. There's a question here from Nettersmith. Is there, I hope I pronounced that right, is there less government oversight with supported decision-making versus limited guardianship?
So, Annette, how are you? Hopefully you're doing well.
I assume you know her.
So there is no government oversight with supported decision-making because it's not a legal arrangement yet, right? There's certainly some movement towards that. And limited guardianship, there's probably there's like no oversight there either unless you're managing their money, right, Margaret? Do you have any oversight from the government at all?
Nope.
On guardianship?
Nope.
No. So there's really none, unless the only oversight you're going to have from the government is if you're managing their money.
Right.
And that doesn't, when he says clarify managing their money, what do you mean by that?
I'm sorry. Good point. If you're the guardian of the estate or the conservator of the estate, meaning the court has granted you oversight legally over their finances.
Like they have a ton of money, like hundreds of thousands of dollars in an estate, which is not our situation. And another thing about supported decision-making, it's a terrific theory, but it's also more under parenting than it is involving legal things. As parents, we're trying to get our kids to be as independent as possible, and all of that involves supported decision-making.
Yeah, and I think I love supported decision-making because that's really where we try to get all of our families to, is building a team of people who can help support your loved one, right? Especially when you're not able to anymore. that's really what the supported decision making is. It's building a team around your child. So for me, when I look at supported decision making and guardianship, I don't consider them competing. Even if you decide to do guardianship, we should still be doing supported decision making.
Right.
And we do every day as parents.
Yeah. Really. And if you decide the other way, then you decide the other way, right? That's your option. So
you guys want to tackle this question? Can you have both a guardianship and a power of attorney?
No.
Okay.
No, because you don't need if you're the guardian, you don't need a power of attorney. And if you're the power of attorney, the advocate or the agent of the court, which every attorney is considered an agent of the court, which is why they can do power of attorneys, because your child signed a power of attorney, that attorney who did that document, like Margie said, has deemed your child competent.
Right.
So no, you can't do both.
Christine is saying, should he register the guardianship with HR at his job in case of emergency?
No, because because if you're the next contact in emergency on the line, they're going to call you.
Right. Yep. Because most times at a job, they have, who's your emergency contact, right, on file.
For everybody.
For everybody, yeah. For regardless of who the employee is, right? They're going to have an emergency contact on file in that HR file, and you just be that. And like Margaret said, I loved her technique. It's simple, but, a laminated card somewhere that your child carries on their body that says, hey, in case of emergency, contact this person.
That in the interest of thinking through the worst case scenarios, right? So medical emergency happens, and they can't reach you, Margaret, because you are unavailable, you're in a conference, you don't answer the phone. What do hospitals do if someone's in their possession or care and he or she is unconscious, or maybe he or she is not unconscious, but is clearly unable to? Like, thinking of my son. If my son was in the hospital and he couldn't get reached, he is not going to be able to articulate any of it. So what is?
So my husband is the secondary contact. There's usually a secondary contact. So my husband is the secondary contact.
So they just keep going around until they can reach somebody.
Well, I mean, again, and you have to think of it in, like you said, in the real world, right? God forbid Davis is in a car accident,
right,
and he's unconscious and bleeding, right? They're not going to wait around to find out if they should treat him or not, just like they wouldn't for you, Keith, right? If you're in a car accident and the ambulance comes and takes you from the scene to the emergency room, you're bleeding and unconscious, they're not going to wait around and be like, well, if he dies before he wakes up, see if we should treat him. I guess he does. Oh, well, big deal.
All right.
They don't do that. They're going to treat you because you obviously are in massive distress,
right? And
you can't verbalize because you've been hit in the head,
right?
Right. So, I mean, it's the same thing. Again, remember, guys, it's the same thing. I mean, if there's a true emergency, they're not asking anybody for who their guardian is because they just have to save their life.
Let's see. Yeah.
I think it's more like what Margie said earlier. Hey, all of a sudden your child has a tumor on their shoulder and the doctor's like, listen, we need to go into surgery to take this off. And all of a sudden your child is being described to them what surgery is, and they're freaking out, scared to death. Right? As you, the guardian, you can be like, no, man, you have to do this or else you're going to die 6 years from now from cancer that's going to eat your body alive. But now we can take it off and you'll be fine. But they don't understand that long-term impact.
Right.
They just see, holy mackerel, you're going to put me to sleep and slice open my shoulder with this big knife you just talked about, and I could possibly bleed to death.
Yeah, no,
I don't think I want to do that. Right. I mean, and so that's really, I think, where a guardianship would come in truly handy.
Or diabetes, or just complicated medical stuff.
See, that's why Margaret's here. I go to the severe, which is like, oh my gosh.
So Braylon is asking, this is something that we get asked all the time, so I'm going to go ahead and answer it. She's asking, I've heard that age 18 is a start paperwork for guardianship. Is that true? And I'll answer that. Yes, start in the 18s. In California, they're 2 to 3 months out. Turned out when I applied, they were only a month out. Since I'm going to have some corrections I need to make that we talked about earlier, I'm assuming it's going to take a process of 3 or 4 months. So if you're 6 months out in California, I'm not sure if other states are relatively similar, but you've always said 17 and a half, something like that, then you're probably golden. Now, I know in California, I don't know if this is true elsewhere, but they have to send out these letters to what they call the regional center, who is the ones who provides care before age 18 or 22 and after. They're the people who provide services to people with disabilities. So I'm assuming that's the same person that you were talking to now. We would send the letters to ALTA, our regional center, saying, is our son really have the capacity or not have the capacity to make his own decisions? Because one of the things I thought was interesting is that they absolutely wanted to know who all the parents were, all the grandparents were, because they're going to reach out to every one of them, including the siblings, to confirm that they also agree that the son has some limitations to that. So I thought, you're going to ask 8, 9, 10-year-olds, they have everyone, and they wanted me to list my dad, who's not even alive now. They wanted everybody listed so they can try to reach each person, and they have an investigator who goes out and confirms that. Now, one other comment I'm going to make that just happened because of the whole Britney Spears thing, that California is now, there's a new law being signed in the next couple of days that's going to completely change the conservator/guardianship. I don't know how that's going to affect people with disabilities, if at all, but if it does, we'll be sure to talk to you guys more about that new California statute. And there might be other states who are going to do that as well because of the visibility of that actress or star.
I'm just going to, and I want to add one thing to SSI that's very brief. If you are close to retirement age and you have a child that might be ready to apply for SSI, get the SSI payment do the SSI process first before you retire, because that will impact the ability to keep Medicaid, possibly. So if you're thinking about retiring but haven't done SSI yet, do SSI first.
Hold on.
And get an SSI payment in the bank account, and then
I need more. I need to understand that better more.
For retirement from SSA.
All right, tell me more what that means.
But not ask for your benefit.
What's the issues here? I'm missing something. I know it's important, so that's why I want to dig into it. So what is it that you're saying specifically that we need to do, and why should we be concerned about it?
Yeah, because what happens is if your child's deemed disabled, and then when you retire,
well, there's a Medicaid income limit.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a Medicaid income limit, and if you retire before your child turns 18 and begin to receive Social Security, mm-hmm. right? Let's say you're getting, $2,000 a month, mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, you've already retired, you're getting $2,000 a month, and then your child turns 18, and they go to apply for SSI, right? They get approved, but they never get an SSI check. They're going to become a disabled adult child, and they're going to get 50% of your benefit. So they're all of a sudden going to get $1,000 and never receive an SSI check. And so if your Social Security benefit is too high and it's above the Medicaid monthly income limit, mm-hmm. they will lose the ability to have all Medicaid services because their income will be too high. Now, if they receive just one payment of SSI, just one, mm-hmm. then they will qualify for what's called the pass-along program. Mm-hmm. And it won't matter how much income they receive on your record for Social Security. They'll still keep all their Medicaid services.
So just to clarify, because I think this is a really important part, if you're, yeah, so we can't be ending without ending on that without being clear. So are you saying that if you're considering retiring during the time frame that your child is going to be turning 18 and applying for these benefits, this is of concern to you? If you have retired years in advance of that, it is not an issue. Or if you plan to retire years past the 18 time, that's not an issue. It's just that window of time.
Yep. So again, if you've already been retired, you don't have a choice. So it may be an issue, it may not be. I don't know. It just depends on what the retirement benefit is. But yes, if you're in the window of time where you're deciding to retire, mm-hmm. and your child is turning 18 to qualify for SSI, do the SSI first, mm-hmm. and then do your retirement.
Okay.
Just do that. You don't really have to know the reasons why. Just do that.
I don't even follow instructions, so I don't want to hear the reasons. Just tell me, do this, Keith.
Yeah, just tell you, yeah. If you're close to retiring and getting Social Security, do their SSI first, then do your Social Security retirement. And the other one is let's say something happened to you as a parent and you were going to apply for Social Security disability income at the same time period as your child applying for SSI. Again, do SSI first, do your own Social Security later, right? Always, if you're in that window of time that you're applying for any Social Security benefit for yourself, disability or retirement, do SSI first.
Okay. All right.
Then apply for your own.
And I don't need to know why. I understand. Just trust Ryan and Margaret. I trust that. So I'm perfectly fine with it. So let's answer George's question here. Will my income still count when my son turns 18 next week? Well, happy birthday to your son there, George. He will get SSI and cap Medicaid here in North Carolina.
Okay, so your income will not count, but you will have to go through the process of calling Social Security and letting them know that your son's status has changed. He's no longer a minor child. He's 18, so he's an adult. And you may have to go through, Social Security will tell you if you have to go through the process to have him deemed disabled as an adult. If he's been receiving SSI for a while, he may not have to. That's a question Social Security will answer. But you have to let them know that his status has changed. He's now going to be 18. And what do you need to do to keep his benefit coming?
All right, here's a quick question here. What are the difference between the SSI and SSDI limits?
Oh, that's like a whole session.
Oh.
The quick pieces of it is SSI. There are financial requirements, right? You can't have a certain number of assets, and you can't have a certain level of income to qualify. SSDI doesn't have any of those. So Social Security disability income is based purely on being disabled and based upon what your work history is, and to make sure you have at least 40 quarters of work history in the system to get the complete benefit. So it's totally based on your work history and your disability of being able to work. It has no financial requirements whatsoever. But again, as we just talked about, and I know this can get very confusing, if a parent is on Social Security disability income, then a child will receive Social Security disability income based on the parent. So it's blending a little bit, but just as SSI versus SSDI, the difference is financial requirements.
Okay.
And another differentiation, SSI is a line item in the budget that comes out of the budget. SSDI benefits come out of the paycheck taxes that everybody pays. And that goes to people that are disabled, retired, or have passed away. And that's all paycheck related. SSI is a separate pool entirely.
Right.
And that may help keep those pieces of pie separate.
Excellent. Well, one last thing. I don't think we answered it directly, so I want to make sure we do. We had talked about the legal and financial structures. Have we answered that and shared what we're talking about that's important for people? Is it just the special needs trust, the ABLE account, things we've always talked about? Is there something different for that? We talked about the legal and financial structures that are necessary as they go into adulthood.
Yep, those are certainly those pieces, like a special needs trust, ABLE accounts, rep payee accounts, but also the structure. If you're thinking of this, and you're probably not on this webinar if your child's 13 because you didn't think it was important. But if you are, it is, there's a 5-year look back to Medicaid. So in the event of a grandparent, a parent that has some kind of an account that they've been saving with your child's name on it, or it's a custodial account like a UTMA or a UGMA or something like that, that could cause an issue. So when we think about financial structure, it's, okay, I need to make sure I understand the rules, and I need to understand what pieces my family may have in place that need to be changed before we go apply for benefits. So that's part of it as well.
Okay. Well, Brian, I think it's probably very likely that as I'm applying for benefits, I will be not going it alone. I'll be calling you guys. So I think I've learned my lesson that I'm not as skilled as I thought I might be. So it's all good. We're going to go ahead and wrap up because we're over the hour. Like we try to stick to about an hour. I'll try to get to as many questions as possible. And Margaret, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Ryan. Do you have any last final jokes you'd like to make or any last words of wisdom you'd like to share?
Not really, except if you need help and have somebody to ask for help, don't be shy about it, because the energy that's wasted trying to solve problems at 2 o'clock in the morning in a Google search is time that's wasted.
Right.
And if you have a resource, use it. That's what they're there for.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you guys all for joining us. We appreciate that. And with that, I guess we'll see you guys at the next webinar.